For over 50 years, the mystery of Elvis Presley's final years remained unsolved. But now, the only doctor who refused to submit to Colonel Parker, Dr. Daniel Brighton, is ready to tell his story. Brighton discovered that the king's addiction was not merely an abuse, but a complex operation to find oblivion, an escape from the public deity that was consuming him. He witnessed Elvis intentionally create secret caches of pills, seeking to control his disappearance while his soul disintegrated. Let's begin. 1. The beginning, soul probing. To millions, he was Elvis Aaron Presley, the king who had just returned with a triumphant concert in Las Vegas, having reclaimed his crown after years of Hollywood musicals. He was a symbol of rebellion, sexuality, and the ultimate expression of the American dream. But behind the scenes of this dazzling glory, something else was happening, invisible to the public. In 1969, in Memphis, long before the king's addiction became his public disgrace, he faced a new, more insidious problem: chronic pain that resisted conventional treatment and nightmares that tore his sleep to shreds. These symptoms were a physical projection of the internal collapse taking place within the king. It was then that Dr. Daniel Brighton, a young but already brilliant physician specializing in internal medicine, entered his life. Brighton had a rare reputation. He was the only one who was not afraid of Colonel Tom Parker. Brighton, a man of science, considered Elvis merely a complex diagnostic case, not a mythical figure. Unlike the army of accommodating doctors who were ready to write any prescription in exchange for a photo or an autograph, Brighton demanded absolute control over the treatment and complete confidentiality. He explicitly stated that he would not trade his license for a Hollywood smile. Colonel Parker reluctantly agreed, only because the patient, his most valuable asset, was spiraling out of control due to unbearable migraines that threatened to derail the Vegas concert schedule, which would cost millions. The first examination took place in a closed room at Graceland, blocked from prying eyes and ears. It was a strange scene. A young doctor attempting to assess the condition of a living legend who, despite all his physical power and charm, looked like a broken doll held together only by sheer willpower. His eyes, even in the room's light, were heavy, and his movements were too slow for a man who had just wowed Las Vegas. Elvis spoke softly, without his usual theatricality. "I have something that won't let me sleep. I feel like my body knows something my mind doesn't remember." Brighton performed a thorough physical examination, diagnosing physical ailments exacerbated by unprecedented stress and chronic fatigue, but quickly realized his true patient was not a liver or a heart, but fear. A fear that constantly sought physical embodiment to justify the need for oblivion. It was a pain that could not be anesthetized with conventional means because its roots lay in the soul. Brighton immediately began his unorthodox approach, which shocked the king's entourage. He ordered the removal of all medications from Graceland that were not personally sanctioned by him. He sealed the medicine cabinets and ordered the Memphis Mafia to surrender all prescription drugs they possessed. This caused genuine chaos. The king's bodyguards and friends looked at Brighton with hostility and distrust. To them, he was a dilettante interfering with their normal routine. Some refused, claiming the pills were just vitamins or special sleeping aids prescribed years ago. Brighton, ignoring them, introduced a strict regimen that included physical exercise, meditation, and, most importantly, long, unstructured conversations. These are not merely sessions, but soul-probing that Elvis, it seemed, was yearning for. The king, who spoke with God and White House officials, proved unable to talk about himself. He spoke about his deceased twin, Jesse, about always feeling like a half-person who had to live for two. He spoke about Gladys, his late mother, calling her the only audience that truly saw him. Brighton noted, "His fame is just a loud way to fill the silence his mother left behind." This primal fear of being forgotten, of being incomplete, was the fundamental cornerstone of his psychological addiction. Brighton realized he was not treating a patient, but a collapsing myth. 2. The double life and the addiction to disappearance. Brighton implemented a strict regimen, which included physical exercise, meditation, and, most importantly, long, unstructured conversations. For him, it was the only path to the truth. The king, who usually gave interviews and spoke with God and White House officials with ease, proved incapable of talking about himself in the present tense. His confessions always returned to the past, to the roots of his identity. He spoke of his missing twin, Jesse, saying he always felt like a half-person who had to live for two, and this pressed upon him with the weight of two destinies. He spoke of Gladys, his late mother, calling her the only audience that truly saw him. Not the king, but little Aaron from Tupelo, Brighton noted. His fame is just a loud way to fill the silence his mother left behind. Brighton tried to build a bridge between Elvis the King and Elvis Aaron, but quickly realized that these two entities could not coexist. They were in a state of constant civil war inside one man. The king lived in the light. Aaron lived in the shadow of Graceland. The real intrigue began when Brighton discovered that Elvis was systematically lying about his medication intake. He wasn't just taking more than prescribed. He was collecting them, accumulating vast reserves. This discovery happened during one of the late-night visits when Brighton, trusting his intuition, stayed late. He accidentally noticed a strange tilt in a painting in the jungle room. Behind it, he found a complete pharmacy, carefully hidden, Placidils, Demerols, Valiums. This was not a collection hastily put together. It was a strategic supply network whose existence, to his surprise, was unknown even to Colonel Parker. Elvis used his bodyguards, distant relatives, and even local fans to get prescriptions in various states, creating a perfect wall of silence. This was a shocking level of organization and paranoid caution. He developed his own logistics system to ensure that if any doctor refused, he would always have a black reserve. Brighton was stunned. This was a shocking revelation. This was not a simple addiction to pleasure. It was an operation created by a man who needed complete control over his escape. Elvis did not want to be dependent on a single doctor, even Brighton. He wanted to be certain that his path to oblivion would always be open and uninterrupted. When Brighton confronted him, Elvis showed no guilt. On the contrary, he displayed a detached, almost philosophical cynicism. "This is my freedom," document. "This is my true fortress of light. If I can decide when I'm gone, then I'm truly the king." In this phrase, Brighton saw everything. "I want to become invisible, Denny, just for a few hours." Brighton understood that this wasn't drug addiction. It was an addiction to the feeling of absolute anonymity and oblivion, and the pills were the fastest way to that state. They were a chemical cocoon that allowed Elvis to temporarily escape the king. He wasn't seeking euphoria, he was seeking silence. Brighton concluded that Elvis was truly afraid of waking up in the morning and finding that he still had to be the king. His body had become a cage for him, made of fame and the colonel's dollars. Therefore, the mafia were his involuntary accomplices in self-destruction. They were the wardens of his prison, unconsciously helping him prepare the tools for his liberation. This system of lies and secrecy was Elvis's second shadow life, a life in which he was the master, unlike the public life, which was completely managed by Colonel Parker. Brighton tried to explain that true control lies in freedom from chemistry, but Elvis just shook his head. "You don't understand, document. This is the only control I have. If I give this to you, I give you myself. And I can only trust myself with myself." It was a tragic closed loop. A man who could not trust the world found trust only in dangerous substances that promised him temporary disappearance. From that moment, Brighton understood that his mission had become complicated. He had to fight not only the addiction, but also the will for oblivion, which the king considered his only right. 3. Mystical quests, the key to Graceland. During this period, Brighton noticed that pills were not his only obsession. Elvis became passionately interested in mysticism, numerology, and the true meaning of his fame. This was not merely a hobby, but a deep, desperate search for answers that his medicine could not solve. He forced Brighton to spend hours reading esoteric texts about world religions, spiritualism, Eastern philosophy, and even occultism. Elvis, like an insatiable student, sought to fill the spiritual void left by his failed attempt to be just a man. "It's not just music, Doc," Elvis insisted, often gesturing like a preacher. "God gave me this voice to say something. I just forgot what, and now I have to find it. My fame is a prophecy." He genuinely believed that his talent and influence had a cosmic purpose, that he was the chosen one, and his suffering was only a stage of purification. The king believed that Graceland was not just a house, but a fortress of light, protecting him from the evil of Hollywood and energy vampires among ordinary people. He created a truth zone on the estate, a special place where he demanded visitors only speak the truth, because he believed lies had a physical, destructive power. However, Elvis himself, ironically, rarely adhered to this rule, consumed by his own fabrication. Brighton, as a man of science and empiricism, considered this mystical obsession an intellectual escapism, another way to avoid reality. Elvis was searching for a higher purpose to justify his destructive behavior. If his pain and addiction were part of a great spiritual plan, then he was not a weak man, but a martyr. This was the perfect, though tragic, justification for a king who could no longer control his physical world. Once, Elvis showed Brighton his collection of amulets and special crystals. "My physical pains, Doc, are not an illness. They're spiritual attacks. I must survive them to cleanse my soul and be ready for the next level." Brighton felt the chasm between him and his patient widening. He realized that Elvis was not looking for a cure, but for absolution through mysticism. He was trying to turn his medical problem into a theological dilemma, where the only doctor who could save him was, by his own logic, an obstacle on the path to enlightenment. This obsession became the king's final and most insurmountable psychological defense. He had already begun building a bridge, not to salvation, but to transcendence, a place where the pills could take him faster than any meditation. For the Colonel's Trap and the Ethical Catastrophe. In 1973, after the divorce from Priscilla, Elvis's condition worsened to critical. The breakup was not just the end of a marriage for him, but the collapse of the last bridge to the normal world. With Priscilla went his last thread connecting him to conscious, sober life. Without this anchor, the king gained full power over Aaron. Elvis became more withdrawn, his attacks of paranoia intensified, and the doses of medication he secretly stockpiled grew alarmingly. Brighton noted in his diaries, "The patient has entered a standby mode. The physical body is now merely a vessel for fulfilling contractual obligations." The king became a ghost in his own mansion, his life a series of dark, heavy days and nights filled with loneliness and chemistry. His paranoia sharpened to the brink of clinical psychosis. He demanded Brighton check the walls for hidden microphones and insisted he was constantly being followed by communists or secret government agents. He even began collecting badges of police and federal agents, believing these symbols of authority would protect him from his own enemies, the ones he invented and the one he was himself. Brighton understood that Elvis, unable to control his body, was desperately trying to control the external threat. The event that forever etched itself into the doctor's consciousness occurred on the eve of Christmas, 1975. Elvis gifted Brighton a pink Cadillac, his traditional royal gift, but added an envelope containing only a sheet of paper with a single word, "Remember." Brighton was horrified. He understood. This was an encoding, a final plea for rescue and a testimony. Elvis, apparently, was aware of where he was headed and wanted at least one honest person to know the truth about his struggle. Later, when Brighton tried to talk about it, Elvis refused, denying he meant anything special. This only intensified the feeling that two souls lived in one body. One, a weary man begging for help. The other, the king, who had to protect his secret until the end. 5. Final preparations and the witness's guilt. In the period from 1974 to 1977, the sessions ceased, giving way to rare but tense phone calls. Elvis could no longer tolerate the presence of an outsider in his increasingly hermetic world. He became an almost nocturnal creature, avoiding daylight and any reality outside Graceland. Brighton recorded in his diaries, "The patient has entered a standby mode. The physical body is now merely a vessel for fulfilling contractual obligations." The king became a ghost in his own mansion, his life a series of dark, heavy days and nights filled with loneliness and chemistry. His paranoia sharpened to the brink of clinical psychosis. He demanded Brighton check the walls for hidden microphones and insisted he was constantly being followed by communists or secret government agents. He even began collecting badges of police and federal agents, believing these symbols of authority would protect him from his own enemies, the ones he invented and the one he was himself. Brighton understood that Elvis, unable to control his body, was desperately trying to control the external threat. The event that forever etched itself into the doctor's consciousness occurred on the eve of Christmas 1975. Elvis gifted Brighton a pink Cadillac, his traditional royal gift, but added an envelope containing only a sheet of paper with the single word, "Remember." Brighton was horrified. He understood. This was an encoding, a final plea for rescue, and a testimony. Elvis, apparently, was aware of where he was headed and wanted at least one honest person to know the truth about his struggle. Later, when Brighton tried to talk about it, Elvis refused, denying he meant anything special. This only intensified the feeling that two souls lived in one body. One, a weary man begging for help. The other, the king, who had to protect his secret until the end. The climax, the king's release. On August 15th, 1977, Brighton, after a long year of tension, was vacationing in Hawaii. He had specifically left his secure phone, intended only for emergency calls from Graceland. When the device rang late at night, Brighton immediately felt that the irreparable had happened. It was Elvis, his voice as if from the depths of a well, distant and unclear. "Denny," he mumbled. It was the first and only time he called Brighton by his first name. "I did everything I could. I can't be there, God, anymore. I'm tired of carrying two souls, Denny. One of them has to go." Brighton felt not just a chill, but the panic of betraying his own conscience. He had the key, but he was geographically blocked, physically separated from his patient by an ocean. He begged Elvis to call security, to call an ambulance, but the connection was cut. This was a conscious choice of farewell and the final act of control over his life. Brighton realized that Elvis had chosen this moment and this location to avoid rescue. The next day, Brighton learned of the death. He wasn't shocked. He was devastated by guilt. He felt legally and morally threatened. He sold the pink Cadillac, donating the money to addiction treatment, but the main act was destroying all medical records. He feared that his notes would be used by Colonel Parker or the family as evidence of medical negligence, which would only distort Elvis's true story. He kept only the piece of paper. Remember, his story is one of compromise, made by a man of ethics who watched as fame consumed the world's greatest singer, transforming him from a deity into an emptiness. For the next 40 years, Brighton worked in a small clinic, avoiding any publicity. He began writing his manuscript in an old leather journal, using the code name Project Legend. It was not a medical report, but a witness's confession, a detailed description of a psychological struggle. He hid it in a safe, feeling morally obligated to the dead man who had made him his sole, albeit powerless, confidant. Only at the age of 90 did Brighton decide the time was right. His goal was not a sensation, but the fulfillment of Elvis's last will, to remember. To remember not as the one who died on the toilet from an overdose of medication, but as a man who tried so hard to be God that he found no way to be man. Brighton concluded his manuscript with these words: The king died because his kingdom gave him no space to breathe. I was there, I knew it, and my silence was the highest price I paid for his brilliance. This manuscript, which is now being prepared for publication, is the final intriguing link to the truth about the loneliest man in rock and roll history. This is just the beginning. Subscribe to the channel to learn more about Elvis Presley.